Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels as the alliance signals a new phase in transatlantic relations, with growing European responsibility for security and sustained support for Ukraine. NATO members have pledged hundreds of millions of dollars to Pearl, the prioritised Ukraine requirements list. All this comes as the Munich Security Conference kicks off, bringing together global leaders to debate the future of the West's security architecture. To explore both of these events, we're joined by Jacek Raubo. He's director of the Defence 24 Analysis Unit. Jacek, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Hello, and thank you for having me here.
Pleasure. Right, so let's start with NATO. But before we kick off, there's a short soundbite from Mark Rutte that I'd like you to listen to.
Where the US is completely anchored, and at the same time in NATO, where Europe is stepping up with Canada, taking more of a leadership role. And at the same time, what you are seeing is therefore a stronger transatlantic alliance. So, yes, I think, as I said, this for me was one of the most pivotal meetings I've been part of since I have visited NATO meetings since 2010.
Now, Mark Rutte called that a pivotal meeting. What do you think he means by that, Jacek?
Mostly because they were talking about the practical implementation of some of NATO ideas, how to change this balance between U.S. presence and Canada and European state inside this alliance structure. So I think there is always three different layers. First is the money, the most important in my assessment. The second, how we will invest this kind of a new funds about not only strengthening military, but also procurement programs and the process of production. And the third thing, I think this is also a very important issue for the modern NATO members, how to redefine our approach to the different areas of responsibility. We have heard a lot about Arctic. We have heard about Eastern flank, but on the other hand, I think Mark Rutte mentioned a very important phrase about 360-degree perspective. That's why I think everyone is emphasizing that this is a very difficult task for 32 NATO members, but I think this challenge can bring to this NATO, 21st century NATO, a new power, a new strength, and mostly a new pillars to discuss how we can be effective in the context of the various threats. I'm not talking only about Russia.
OK, but that sounds great, but it does need, as you say, some money to back it up with. And, you know, there are lots of NATO members who are not even paying their 2%, let alone the 5% that they should be paying. How are you going to even that out?
Here you touch a very important aspect. That's why last NATO summit been focused only on the money issues. I remember there was a lot of criticism against American approach to the NATO summit, that you won't only talk about money, you won't talk about funds. But on the other hand, this is the most important starting position. If you need right now to strengthen your military, first of all, you need to find money. So I think the U.S. is not playing any kind of a games with other NATO members. If you want to be in NATO, if you want to create effective alliance for the 21st century, you need to spend more. On the other hand, from the European perspective, we need to remember that some of the states, you mentioned that they are not paying enough for their own military. They were always anti-American, and they were always highly skeptical about NATO, and they were talking mostly about European autonomy, European strategic autonomy. And I'm not talking about France. I'm talking For instance, about, I don't know, Spain, for example. This is something we need to change from the both sides. US is a proven ally for us, and I think even this very aggressive tone of Donald Trump narratives is not destroying it, and it's not making a large gap between us and US. On the other hand, we need to do more from the European perspective, and they will put the pressure on us. So that's very obvious for me.
Right. Now, the other aspect, so monetary aspect, is raising the money for Ukraine under the Pearl Initiative. Mark Rutte was quite optimistic about that, talking about billions of dollars. We know that the United Kingdom has donated £500 million already. So what's going to happen to that money?
When we think about the military assistance, we need to still have some 2 or 3 different phases in our mind. The first phase is, of course, getting effective funds for purchasing or supporting formally purchased equipment. The second phase is, of course, this production of necessary missiles, munition, and also other military technologies. And the third thing is how to balance this with our own modernization programs. So this is a very difficult, not only one task, this is a very difficult task. And I think this is also an opportunity for us. Why? First of all, we can enlarge our military production in the context of strengthening Ukraine, and we can use this new scale and new quality and quantity balance for strengthening also our own armed forces. So I'm very optimistic about it, but still, we are coming back to the main thing in our talk right now about money. We need to talk about money. Because we have technologies, we have very interesting military production sites, but we need to strengthen them with new procurements, with effective procurements and long-term investments. And this is the key element, not only necessary for Ukraine, but also for European security.
Right. So U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth didn't come. He was replaced by Eldridge Colby, who spoke of a NATO 3.0, and he said that Europe should take responsibility for its own defence, and he also recommends pivoting the United States' focus towards China and Asia. Is Europe going to be able to stand on its own 2 feet if the US does do that?
Mostly we are talking about changing some levels of American approach inside this area of responsibility. We are not talking about full withdrawal of all of American assets here. And still we are under the nuclear umbrella from United States. So this is not such an apocalyptic vision. I think the statement from the Deputy Secretary of War is a very important step to understand that the conventional forces in Europe need to be based on our own military forces. I'm talking about the mechanized unit, about tanks, about even some naval assets or air force capabilities. We need to have this. And I think we can afford. We see a large number of European states from eastern flank, southern flank, and also from the Nordic region. They are planning to enlarge the number of their air force, land forces, all of their domains. So right now, I think we need to send a strong message to our Western partners from Europe. There is a large and new space for Germany, for instance. They mentioned Germany. Even Boris Pistorius mentioned how they need to start a new journey in the 21st century situation with spending more money on Bundeswehr. France is doing a very effective positive movements in that. The great example is a new exercise which is happening right now, Orion 26, where they are testing their capabilities for land this full-scale combat with cooperation with other partners. But still, Belgium, Spain, some other states, they can afford to put more on the common field of military approach of European state toward threats from Russia, from non-state actors, and also potentially from China. I'm talking about this potential threat coming by Russian support and by supporting Russia.
OK, let's move on to the Munich Security Conference starting tomorrow. What are we expecting? Over 50 world leaders, governments represented. What are we expecting there?
I'm always expecting two different theaters. First, this open theater when we will see enormous emotions, perhaps a very harsh and very strict statements, maybe some strong criticism from US against European perspective, from European perspective against US. But this is only one picture. Behind the doors, I think there will be a much more pragmatic and practical decisions and discussions be made by the high-valued representatives from the various states, and mostly some assessments about the future and the future agreements inside the West, because we need that. And I think all of the sides understand very well that we need to not change and not break some rules. We need to redefine this agreement between the United States and Western Hemisphere and European partners. So I think there will be a lot of emotions and a lot of work for journalists and analysts. On the other hand, there will be a part covered by some practical debates covered by information umbrella, where perhaps we might see long-term decisions or some beginnings of long-term decisions, how we can redefine this Western approach toward different threats.
So redefining our strategy. Jacek Raubo, thank you very much for sharing your analysis. Come and see us again soon. Have a good evening.
Always pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.